I'm Mwangi Kemenyi. I'm a senior fellow here at Brookings and also the director of the Africa Growth Initiative. And I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you all to this event, which we think is a very important one for our continent on this issue of oil and gas. Our president, the president of the Brookings Institution, Stuart Talbot, will be welcoming you again later. So I will not talk much because he will be coming here formally this afternoon to welcome you, which shows us the importance of this type of discussion that we are holding here. The Africa Growth Initiative here at the Brookings Institution is quite focused. Okay, before I tell that story, this is a public event. So everything that you do or say is recorded. We are also on webcast. We are webcasting this event, and for our webcast viewers, we have hashtag. Follow us on hashtag Africa Oil Gas. It's over there. Africa Oil Gas. That's the hashtag. So please note that it's public event. So at the Africa Growth Initiative here at Brookings, we are very focused, among other things, on the management of natural resources. And we are doing quite a bit of work on raising several issues pertaining to natural resource management. So the way we do this is we would like to get this an informed debate. We do not want just to take one side. We would like to get a balanced assessment based on, as much as possible, evidence-based research. So we work with partners. A lot of them, many of them are here on the continent, trying to understand the problems and the issues pertaining to the management of natural resources. As we know, natural resources in Africa have been actually very bad. Okay, endowments have not worked well. I am from Kenya, and I like to say that God loves my country so much that he hid the oil from us for 50 years. So God hid the oil from us for 50 years. Because I can't imagine what would have happened if we had discovered the oil in 1960s. Not because we had bad people. The people are the same. That's a constant. People are the same. What matters is the quality of institutions. And I think that's very important, looking at where we are going ahead. So I'm looking forward to very informative discussions today. And I think we are all here to gain. And we look forward for learning from you also. So please feel free at Brookings, the time we are going to spend here. And we again thank you very much. I'm going to ask my colleague from Oxfam. Again, let me thank Oxfam. We are doing this as a joint event, actually. It's done in collaboration with Oxfam. Oxfam does a lot of work on natural resource management. So thank you very much, the team from Oxfam, for working with us. And we had a very good experience with this. So we look forward. So Paul, come and say a few words. And just as Paul comes, for panelists, when you come here, and even for other audience, please put off your cell phone because it will interfere with the communication. Paul?
Okay, can you hear this? Is it on? Okay. So those of you who know me will know that I'm very shy and retiring and will have real difficulty reaching the back of the room. Okay. Well, thanks, Mwangi. It's an honor for Oxfam to be co-hosting this event with you. This is an amazing moment. When I think of the East Africa oil and gas boom, I think that civil society organizations, and I mean that writ large, I mean the foundations, the think tanks, the academic institutions, the investment advisors, are going to have a real challenge in terms of heart, head, and muscle. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I mean by that. When I first went to the region, it was 1993. It was Kenya. I was working as an organizer in the slums in Nairobi, and I thought what I was witnessing was the dawn of meritocratic politics in the region. I was wrong. I then spent 4 years in the late 90s in Uganda. And like many donors and all the internationals, I looked at President Museveni and I thought I was witnessing someone who would lead his country towards prosperity and democratic freedom, and he would know when to go home. And we all know how that went. The last time I left the region, which was in 2007, I thought it had reached a tipping point, that it was going to finally end extreme poverty. The data tells me I was wrong again. Mozambique rests at second to last in the Human Development Index. 80% of Mozambicans and Tanzanians live on less than $2 a day. 2/3 of Kenyans and Ugandans face the same fate. And so now we stand here, and they have discovered untold wealth in terms of oil and gas. And we have a moment. The numbers are staggering. Mozambique could make in revenues $10 billion a year for the next 40 years. The region, the 4 countries we're here to talk about, is going to invest $7 billion over the next 5 years. The finds that they've already discovered are almost without compare. 130 trillion cubic feet of gas in the last 3 years. 2 billion barrels of oil. So this is the moment. And the question is the region going to use these resources to achieve something very different from the past, or is this another false dawn? Oxfam has been working on this issue for more than 10 years. We don't believe that resources are necessarily a curse for countries. Ian Gary, Keith Slack, and their colleagues have been working off a theory of change for more than a decade, which is actually pretty simple. It goes like this. With enough transparency, the right to know, and enough citizen voice, the right to decide, we can bend government investments towards poverty reduction and protect rights. That's it. So how's it going? Well, the genius of transparency, of course, is how passive-aggressive it is. Its motives are so benign that everybody, corporations, governments, everyone loves transparency until it gets to the point where you are starting to talk about the redistribution of power and resources from the haves to the have-nots. And then things change. So, for example, Oxfam worked for years to get legislation passed, and in 2010 that legislation was passed. We were part of the Publish What You Pay coalition that would make the deals struck by corporations more transparent. Corporations loved voluntary guidelines. But when it got to the point of legislation that would actually threaten their competitive advantage with those who weren't held to the same standards, they sued the Security and Exchange Commission. It's the same with citizen voice. We have been watching the growth of civil society capacity building and voice all around the region in East Africa. It's all very positive from governments and others until it isn't. In Tanzania, I was in London about 2 months ago at the Open Government Partnership, and I saw President Kikwete speak very eloquently and compellingly about how he embraced civil society and transparency without a hint of irony, when only 3 weeks beforehand he had closed, or his government had closed, 2 newspapers for publishing the salaries of government budgets. In 2013, we saw multi-party elections in Kenya, which were very different to what we saw in 1992. But as soon as the new government got into power, what did they do? They tried to pass a law that would prevent local civil society organizations from taking international money, essentially ending a lot of the advocacy they were doing. That law didn't pass, but what did they pass? A law in January that may push the free press out of existence. In Uganda, here's a tweet we got from the Minister for Internal Affairs last week. CSOs should put Ugandan interests first and be opposed to retrogressive foreign ideas and innovations. And when you ask what Ugandan interests are, the next tweet makes it clear. CSOs should carry out their advocacy roles through recognized government channels and institutions. What does all this tell me about transparency and civil society of voice? It tells me that we're getting close. It tells me that we are starting to be very politically relevant to the future of these flows. And so I think the challenge for all of us is threefold. It's about heart, head, and muscle. What do I mean by that? I think we collectively are going to have to show a different kind of courage as we get to more and more political relevance. We're now asking grassroots organizations and local organizations to engage in serious advocacy around redistributing power from the haves to the have-nots. We're asking them to show political courage, and we, those of us who believe that citizen voice matters, are going to have to stand alongside them. That's a very different proposition if you're a funder or an international NGO than it used to be. Second, we're going to have to get creative. The idea that people living in poverty are sitting around waiting for transparent data about budget spreadsheets to change their lives is a fantasy. We are going to have to get creative about how to use technology, data, new and better ideas to connect people to all this new transparency to make it politically salient. We've got great examples of that. The Oil for Agriculture campaign in Ghana harnessed a lot of civil society activism and got the government, through grassroots activism, to make a commitment to spend money on smallholder farmers. There are growing examples, and we're going to have to get very creative about using them and leveraging them. And finally, we're going to have to recognize that in the end of the day, if you want local institutions who will lead development to gain real muscle, then like muscles, we're going to have to use them. We cannot circumvent the local institutions that will deliver development in the long term. If there ever was a time that development thought it was about transferring technology and resources from the affluent countries to the less affluent countries with better widgets and more money, those days are done. What this conference tells us is that the future of East Africa lies with its people and its own natural resources. But if we want to be relevant as civil society organizations to their journey, then we're going to have to show the heart to be with them when the politics gets rough, the brain to help give some ideas that will help connect the grassroots movements to this broad political discussion, and we're going to have to help strengthen, not undermine, the muscle of the local institutions that will ultimately drive development in the region. I have been wrong about a lot of things in East Africa, but I am not wrong about this. The future of East Africa is going to be determined by its own people as they take on power and politics in the region. Thank you. Okay, I have the pleasure. Shall I introduce Maria? Yeah. Okay, we're going to deal with the sound system. Not everybody likes shouting like me. And while I'm still have the stage and am shouting, let me just introduce the moderator who I think will introduce the next panel. So it's one of my own colleagues, and I'm delighted to introduce her, Maria. Maria Ramos, will you come up and take the podium here? I think you're over the very right. Maria joined us not too long ago at Oxfam, and we were absolutely delighted. She has more than 15 years of experience in this sector, working in Angola on the oil sector with the Open Society Institute. She's worked in Ecuador on the Chevron issue, which will be familiar to many of you. She's worked on mining in Guatemala. She has deep experience in both the sector and in the rights agenda that citizens have wanted to engage on this front. I am particularly proud that Maria was tasked with creating a Center for Strategic Support from Oxfam America to the 90 countries that engage. The problem that we have is that every country that Maria goes to and says, would you like to engage on an extractive industries agenda, says yes. And so we're now up to 20 and counting. And even though she is a superhuman, she is only one person with a small amount of resources. So a little bit victims of our success, and I'm sure you'll hear now why we are in demand in this area. So Maria, with that, if you could introduce the panel that will be speaking.